On the 20th of March 1809, a woman was horrifically executed, and her body was then publicly displayed and was dissected. People would flock to see her body being chopped to pieces and cut open, and some even made money from this, charging visitors 3 pence to see the horrific anatomising and dissection of a woman, known as the Witch of Yorkshire. It was said pieces of her skin were even sold as magic charms to ward off evil spirits, but this woman was considered to have been brutal and barbaric. But what is the story of the Witch of Yorkshire, Mary Bateman? Mary Bateman was born in 1768 in Ainsby, and her father was a farmer, and she would learn to read and write. But as a teenage girl, she then worked as a servant in Thirsk in North Yorkshire. At the age of 20, she then moved to York and would work as a dressmaker. But then, following being involved in a burglary, she would flee and live in Leeds. However, over the next 4 years, she worked as a manuta maker, a woman who made dresses for rather wealthy women, and she was killed at this job. She also at this time developed a reputation for being a fortune teller and someone who was referred to as a wise woman or a seer. She would try to predict the future, and people would visit Mary to try this. But she married John Bateman, but Mary could not stay away from a life of crime. In her early years, she also got involved in a number of robberies, and she was caught and imprisoned, but she did manage to escape following bribing guards. In 1796, her husband joined the army, and Mary went with him, but within a year they had returned to Leeds. There were other crimes committed, and she would, following a fire, roam the streets of Leeds begging for money and items for the victims, but she then pocketed these gifts for herself. Some also claimed that she was working at the time as a woman who would carry out illegal abortions. It's fair to say that Mary Bateman was a very shady woman, and she was living a very strange life. Her husband was living a good life, but Mary could not stay away from crime. People would continue to flock to Mary's home to hear their fortunes being told, and they would pay for this, but she would also sell potions and charms and claimed that she could cure illnesses, but Mary Bateman would then become a murderer. The first people to die by her hand in 1803 were 3 women from a family named Kitchen. Mary befriended them, and she then helped out in their shop. She told these women their fortunes, and when one of these women became ill, Mary nursed her better with special powders. But soon the 3 women had died, presumably from poison, and Mary blamed their deaths on the plague. Locals did not say anything, but they found that the drapery shop had been stripped bare, and the accounts were missing. But no one questioned Mary. She continued to find new clients and tried to target the sick with magic treatments, and she was very well connected. In 1806, she tried to predict the apocalypse, and she said that the chickens she owned laid eggs saying, "Christ is coming," written on them. More people came to Mary for protection, but then in the spring of 1806, a couple, William and Rebecca Pergio, reached out to her. Rebecca had a nervous disorder and had problems in her side, and Rebecca asked Mary to help, and Mary agreed to help. It was claimed that she had been afflicted with a spell, and Mary asked for money from her, and the Pergios gave her a small fortune. Mary then gave the couple special powders which she said were to be sprinkled into puddings that the couple should eat. They also were told that no one should eat the powder except them. But Mary had laced food with poison, and the couple fell ill immediately, and it was said that a violent heat came out of his mouth, which was very sore, that his lips were black, and that he had most violent pain in his head, 20 times worse than a common headache, and that everything appeared green to him. On the 24th of May 1807, Rebecca Pergio died, and William, her husband, did not. He had no money, and he continued to be given potions from Mary Bateman, and he would then confront her about what happened, but he would bring with him a constable. Mary tried to claim that William Pergio had poisoned his wife, and she said, "That bottle which you gave me yesterday night has almost poisoned me and my husband, who is ill in bed in consequence of taking it." But following this, Mary Bateman was arrested, and a search of her house uncovered items that had been handed over by the Pergios. Following Mary's arrest, she was then brought to trial for the murder of Rebecca, and this began on the 17th of March 1809 at York Castle. She denied poisoning and denied the charges, and was said to have a tongue in her head that would wheedle the devil. Witnesses came forward to tell of the scams of Mary Bateman, and the scope of her crimes was huge. Then the unexpected death as the kitchens emerged, and the doctor who analysed the Pergios' food found mercury, which was used to poison. The jury would then return a guilty verdict of murder, and it was said that, for crimes like Mary's in this world, the gates of mercy are closed. She declared that she was pregnant, and if this was true, the execution of her would be postponed or commuted. But she tried to claim she was innocent, but her fate would be completely horrific. At this time there was a need for bodies for anatomy and dissection in universities. Body snatchers and grave robbers would operate inside of towns and cities, and murderers were also allowed to be anatomised. On the 20th of March 1809, Mary went in front of the hangman, William Mutton Curry, for her execution. She was led up the scaffold, and she went to the New Drop Gallows near York Prison, and thousands of people had come out to watch the execution of the woman who was known as the Yorkshire Witch. As she was handed over to the executioner, she continued to deny her murder charges and crimes, and many claimed that she died with a lie on her lips, and that she believed she would be saved by a miracle. The executioner secured the noose around her neck and kicked out a stool from underneath her, and she was then left slowly, strangling to death as the crowds looked on. She was infamous as a criminal, but then the ordeal of Mary Bateman would not be over. Her body was then cut down in front of the crowd, and it was then taken to Leeds Infirmary. It was then publicly dissected, and everything was removed out of her body, and her skin was removed. This just left the skeleton of Mary Bateman, the Witch of Yorkshire. It was said that the public were allowed to see this happening, and then the display of her body, and it took 3 days for this to be done. William Hay performed this, and on day 1 medical students paid to view the corpse, but on day 2 about 100 tickets were available to gentlemen who paid 5 guineas, and then on day 3 women could buy a ticket to see the body. But things went further. As the surgeon cut off pieces of her skin, these were then tanned into leather and were then sold to the local people as magic charms which would ward off evil spirits. The top of her tongue was even collected by the governor of Ripon Prison, and then 2 books were made and covered using her skin. But the death and execution of the Witch of Yorkshire was brutal and shocking, but she was considered a murderess who became infamous for her work as a poisoner. Her remains today still exist, and the skeleton can be seen in a museum. But Mary Bateman was a brutal and horrific murderess who would be hanged and then skinned and have all her organs removed for her crimes. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.